boring history for sleep. Polynesian star paths, steering double canoes by rising fish constellations. Hey guys, tonight we drift into Polynesian twilight. The sand is still warm from the day, your toes sinking into it as you shuffle closer to the shoreline. Palm leaves clatter softly in the evening breeze, like lazy applause for your bravery in stepping onto a canoe that looks, frankly, more like a pair of oversized bathtubs lashed together than a vehicle worthy of the Pacific Ocean. The horizon is glowing red and gold, and up above, the first pinpricks of light start to appear. Stars that will guide you across thousands of miles of open water. You probably won't survive this voyage if you actually tried it right now. I mean, you can barely remember which way your GPS points when you step out of your driveway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, drop a comment telling me your location and the local time. You'd be surprised how far this sleepy little community stretches across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The canoe waits for you. It's a double-hulled marvel, built from breadfruit trees and lashed with coconut fiber ropes that creak as the tide lifts it. You step carefully onto the woven deck, and your weight shifts slightly between the hulls, like standing on a gentle trampoline. The paddlers don't speak much. They move with that quiet assurance that comes from a lifetime of practice. One of them hands you a strip of dried fish. "Snack?" he mutters. You take it politely, trying not to think too hard about whether it has been salted, smoked, or simply left out in the sun for a week. The sails are patched with woven pandanus leaves, their coconut oil scent mixing with salt spray. As the last colors of twilight fade, you hear the slap of waves against the canoe hull, the paddles dipping in unison, and then silence, just the ocean breathing. Above you, the real map begins to unfurl. Here's the mainstream fact. Polynesians mastered one of the greatest feats of navigation in history. Without compasses, sextants, or Google Maps, they spread across an ocean larger than all the continents combined. That's right. They managed to populate islands like Hawaii, New Zealand, and Rapa Nui, all while Europeans were still trying to figure out whether sea monsters lurked beyond Portugal. The quirky tidbit. Some navigators were trained to read the color of ocean swells with their thighs. They would literally lie on the canoe deck, legs spread across the planks, feeling how the waves rocked the hull to judge whether a current was steady or shifting. Imagine explaining that on a resume. Special skill calf-based navigation. Historians still argue whether Polynesian sailors reached the Americas before Columbus did. Some point to sweet potatoes native to South America, but found across Polynesia as evidence of early contact. Others insist that maybe the tubers floated there on their own, which makes you picture one very determined potato doing the backstroke across the Pacific. Your eyes trace the sky. A navigator beside you points upward, where a cluster of stars begins to climb. "The fish," he murmurs, and you see the outline of a constellation resembling a school swimming across the heavens. These aren't just pretty dots. They're signposts. By knowing when and where these fish rose, sailors could fix their bearings. You lean back, lulled by the rhythm of the paddles. The canoe cuts steadily toward the deep ocean, leaving behind the sound of land, the insects, the crackle of fires, the laughter of people settling into sleep. Out here, there's only the hush of waves and the quiet company of stars. The journey has begun, and you realize this is a different kind of map. One written across the night sky, read not with your eyes alone, but with memory, rhythm, and trust in patterns that stretch across generations. The sails unfurl, and the canoe sighs forward, leaving the lagoon behind. The water changes almost immediately inside the reef. It's calm, a sleepy turquoise basin. Outside, it becomes an endless quilt of rolling indigo, stitched together with threads of moonlight. The paddlers shift their rhythm, a low chant slipping between their breaths. Coconut-scented oil drips from the woven rigging, reminding you that this vessel is as alive as the people guiding it. You sit cross-legged, rocking slightly like a child in an enormous cradle. Out here, every sense feels sharpened. The ocean air is thick with salt, the kind that leaves your lips crusted before you even realize you've been licking them. Above, constellations multiply like confetti thrown across a black velvet sky. You notice Orion's belt, but the navigator ignores it. To him, that's just a trivial pattern foreigners fuss about. He points instead to Teika, the fish, stretching higher with each passing minute. You try to trace its scales from star to star, and though you can't quite see it, you nod anyway, pretending you do. Here's a mainstream fact. Polynesian double canoes weren't just boats. They were floating villages. Some measured over 100 feet long, capable of carrying whole families, pigs, chickens, and enough breadfruit paste to keep a small army fed for weeks. The voyagers slept, cooked, and repaired sails, all while perched on platforms no wider than your living room. The vessels were steady enough to survive tempests that would have sent smaller European caravels spiraling into legend. The quirky tidbit? Sailors sometimes smeared coconut oil on their faces to keep the salt from cracking their skin. Practical, yes, but also a bit glamorous. Imagine 30 men gleaming like runway models, squinting at the horizon while reeking faintly of dessert topping. Historians still argue whether these canoes were primarily rowed or sailed on long journeys. Some evidence suggests paddling was reserved for maneuvering near islands, while the sails did most of the work across vast distances. Others believe crews alternated paddling shifts even in mid-ocean, which makes you picture the exhaustion of rowing across something the size of Texas, then doing it again, and again, and again. The night deepens. A warm breeze rushes across your shoulders, carrying hints of crushed pandanus leaves and smoldering wood from villages fading behind. You close your eyes and feel the canoe tip and right itself, tip and right again. The paddler's timing is hypnotic. One yawns audibly and another chuckles, teasing him for breaking the spell. Even here, 1,000 miles from land, someone will always make fun of you for falling asleep too soon. You notice the navigator never glances down. His gaze is locked on the horizon, where stars rise in arcs, then settle back down. To him, the sky is a wheel slowly turning, its spokes made of constellations. Each spoke is a highway, leading to islands hidden far beyond sight. You realize this is less like navigation and more like playing an interstellar connect-the-dots game with your life on the line if you get it wrong. The canoe rocks, and you shift uncomfortably, trying to imagine yourself here for weeks. No Netflix, no air conditioning, just salted fish and the occasional coconut cracked against the hull. And yet, there's something soothing in the rhythm. The world is reduced to stars above, water below, and the whisper of sails pulling you forward. You're suspended between everything and nothing, carried gently into the night. The night thickens until the sea and sky seem stitched together by a single silver thread of moonlight. You blink, trying to tell where the horizon ends and the stars begin, but the navigator beside you doesn't struggle at all. He squats low, steady as a carved figurehead, and points toward the eastern sky. A faint glitter rises there, clusters of stars twinkling in patterns your tired eyes refuse to hold. "These are the fish," he says quietly, and you squint. To you, they're just a handful of dots, but to him, they are scales on an enormous celestial creature swimming up from the horizon. As each fish lifts, it tells him a direction, a time, and a promise of where the canoe should glide. Mainstream fact: in Polynesian wayfinding, constellations were organized into star lines, guiding navigators like highways across the sea. Each rising star marked a specific compass point. When it set, another took its place, ensuring the canoe always had a stellar guide. No compass needle needed, just a sky-wide relay race of light. Quirky tidbit: some voyagers nicknamed tricky constellations with everyday metaphors. One cluster resembled a fishhook, another a shark's tooth. There's even a record of sailors joking that a star looked like a stubborn pig refusing to leave its pen. When you've been at sea for 3 weeks, star comedy becomes top-tier entertainment. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators standardized these constellations across the Pacific, or if each island culture improvised its own celestial vocabulary. Some scholars say Shared names made long voyages possible, while others suggest navigators adapted locally, proving once again that humans can disagree about literally anything, including which dot is a tuna and which dot is a mackerel. The canoe glides on. The paddlers barely splash now, letting the sail do its work. You look up again, and for a moment, the fish constellation truly does seem alive, swimming across the black surface of the heavens, leading you onward. The thought soothes you, even as your eyelids grow heavy, lulled by the swaying canoe and the quiet laughter of men who can read the sea like a bedtime story. The canoe rocks gently as you lean closer to see what the navigator is fiddling with. At first, it looks like a child's craft project. Slender sticks bound with twine, shells knotted at different intersections. But this is no toy. It's a memory tool, a map of invisible forces stretched across an endless ocean. He runs his finger along one arc and nods, as if consulting a trusted friend. You realize you're staring at a Marshall Islands stick chart, one of the quirkiest and most brilliant navigational devices in history. Mainstream fact: these charts weren't maps in the Western sense. They didn't show coastlines or exact distances. Instead, each curved stick represented wave swells, while shells marked island positions. A navigator memorized the chart on land, then relied on his own senses to confirm those patterns while at sea. Think of it like studying the instruction manual at home, then tossing it aside and building the IKEA furniture from memory. The quirky tidbit? Some navigators built their memory palaces inside their own heads, chanting elaborate poems that described each wave and star. They'd recite these verses under their breath, a kind of lullaby that doubled as a survival guide. You can imagine one poor apprentice trying to keep the rhythm straight, only to forget a verse halfway through and mutter, "Wait, was that the crab star or the coconut star?" Cue collective groaning from the crew. Historians still argue whether these stick charts were actually carried aboard canoes or kept safely ashore. Some say they were too fragile for sea travel, while others insist a skilled wayfinder needed the tactile reassurance mid-voyage. Either way, the fact that they existed at all proves a deep, almost poetic commitment to encoding the ocean in wood and shell. The canoe rises on a swell and you feel it, that rhythmic push and pull, the ocean's pulse beneath your feet. The navigator closes his eyes, tilts his head, and seems to be listening. You try it yourself, but all you hear is the slosh of water against hull. Still, it's strangely comforting, as if the waves themselves are whispering directions you're just not fluent enough to understand. Above, the fish constellation has climbed higher. The navigator doesn't need to look at his stick chart anymore. The sea itself has become his map, the stars his signposts, and the rocking beneath you a gentle reminder that the world can be read in patterns if only you stay still long enough. The canoe creaks softly as the paddlers settle into a slower rhythm. Out here, speed isn't the point. It's endurance, patience, and knowing when the ocean itself is whispering hints. You lean forward, elbows on your knees, and try to sense what the navigator senses. His eyes aren't always on the stars. Sometimes he squints at the waves as though each ripple carries gossip from islands hundreds of miles away. Mainstream fact: Polynesian navigators read swells with astonishing skill. Different ocean currents overlapped in layers, each rolling from a distinct direction. By memorizing how one swell felt compared to another, wayfinders could keep a canoe steady on its route, even on cloudy nights when stars vanished. It's like having Wi-Fi from the ocean itself, always on, always buzzing as long as you know the password. And the quirky tidbit? Birds acted as messengers too. Certain seabirds flew out from islands every morning, foraging, then returned each evening. Navigators would watch their flight paths to guess where land lay hidden. Imagine you're lost in the Pacific, and your only GPS is a puffin squawking indignantly at you for getting in the way. Still, it worked. Historians still argue whether bird watching was more reliable than swell reading. Some believe that swells provided constant information, while others claim that bird paths were the real key to finding land. The debate continues, partly because neither method leaves behind physical evidence. No fossils of helpful seabird flocks in museums, unfortunately. The sea is quieter now, the paddlers almost whispering with their strokes. You catch sight of a frigate bird circling overhead, its long wings cutting sharp against the stars. One sailor nudges you. It's heading home. You blink, wondering what home even means out here, when the ocean stretches forever in every direction. Yet to them, it's obvious. A bird arcs one way, and suddenly an island exists in that invisible line, waiting to be reached. The canoe rocks again, swayed by overlapping currents. You close your eyes and press your palms flat against the deck, trying to copy the navigator's stillness. The wood vibrates faintly, as though purring. You think you almost catch it. A rhythm, a pattern. But then a rogue splash hits your ankle, and the illusion is gone. The navigator chuckles softly, as though the sea has played another private joke on the rookie traveler in their midst. You smile in the darkness, realizing this. What feels like chaos to you is music to them. Every ripple, every bird call, every sigh of the wind is part of a cosmic playlist. You just don't know the lyrics yet. The night stretches on, the stars wheeling above like slow dancers that never quite leave the floor. You rub your eyes, trying to stay awake, but the steady rocking of the canoe conspires against you. The navigator, still crouched at the stern, looks far less sleepy. He's focused, as though every flicker of starlight carries a secret you'd miss if you dared to blink. Someone nearby clears their throat and murmurs about the direction of the swells, and you realize that even here, in the middle of a vast ocean, people can't resist the urge to argue. Mainstream fact. Scholars know Polynesian settlement of the Pacific took place in astonishing waves, spreading from Samoa and Tonga outward to islands thousands of miles away. Some voyages were deliberate, with double canoes packed for migration. Others may have been accidental drifts, leading to unexpected discoveries. By around 1200 CE, Polynesians had reached New Zealand, and by 1300, they had touched almost every habitable island in the Central Pacific. The quirky tidbit? Sweet potatoes. Yes, the humble tuber that you might smother in marshmallows at Thanksgiving. They're native to South America, but archaeological evidence shows they were cultivated across Polynesia centuries before Europeans arrived. That means either Polynesians sailed to the Americas and brought them back, or those potatoes developed a talent for surfing the Pacific. Personally, betting on the sailors feels safer than imagining a rogue spud paddling itself across 2,000 miles. Historians still argue whether Polynesians reached South America intentionally, trading with coastal peoples, or whether drifting canoes just happened to stumble across the continent. Some even suggest the contact went both ways. The debates keep conferences lively, with one camp waving carbon-dated potato skins and another insisting on ocean current models. Either way, the sweet potato stands as quiet proof that human networks stretch further and stranger than many textbooks admit. The paddlers around you join in the low grumble of the conversation, half teasing, half serious. One suggests that if their ancestors really did reach another continent, they probably traded recipes first breadfruit for sweet potatoes, maybe even arguing about which one was easier to roast. Another sailor laughs so hard he nearly drops his paddle, shaking his head at the thought of Polynesians pioneering the first international potluck. The canoe sways gently. You stretch your legs, yawning, and think about how these debates' ancient roots, drifting or deliberate voyages, are in some ways beside the point. For you, the remarkable fact is simply this. Right now, with nothing but stars overhead and the hush of waves below, you are tracing the same watery roads your distant hosts once traveled. Whether they bumped into the Americas or not, they prove something undeniable, that people could tame the largest ocean on Earth using little more than memory, patience, and maybe the occasional root vegetable as motivation. The days blur into one another out here. And soon, you realize that time at sea isn't measured by hours or minutes. It's measured by meals, naps, and the occasional squabble over who forgot to tie down a basket of taro. The canoe has settled into its rhythm, and so have you. Mainstream fact. Life on a Polynesian voyage was organized around survival routines. Food was stored, carefully dried fish, fermented breadfruit paste sealed in gourds, and coconuts for both meat and water. Fires weren't lit on the canoe. Instead, clay ovens of heated stones were used during short stops on small islets. Everything else had to last, endure, and stretch across weeks of open water. The quirky tidbit, breadfruit paste known as masi or mahi in some places, wasn't just practical. It was an acquired taste. After fermenting for months, it could smell, let's say, adventurous. Some voyagers swore it gave them dreams of ancestors. Others swore it gave them stomach aches. You wonder which one you'd prefer at 3 in the morning on a rocking canoe. Historians still argue whether crews voyaged as large family units with men, women, and children, or whether early expeditions were mostly groups of men who later returned for settlement parties. The archaeological evidence leaves room for both, which leads to lively debates about whether babies were really cooing under the sails during thousand-mile journeys, or whether that detail belongs to myth. Meanwhile, your own body begins to fall into the voyage rhythm. You nap on woven mats, only to wake with the imprint of fibers tattooed across your cheek. You share in dried fish that's more salt than flesh, chew on strips of coconut, and watch the paddlers tease one another with jokes so dry they could double as tinder. Someone mimics a navigator squinting at the stars and declares, "Ah, yes, the sacred constellation of my empty stomach." Laughter spreads across the deck, thin but genuine. The canoe rocks on, a floating village of sleepy faces, salty meals, and a sense of trust in each other, trust in the sea, and trust that the fish in the sky will keep swimming just far enough ahead to show the way. The air grows warmer as days pass, and with warmth comes rules, quiet, peculiar codes that seem almost designed to keep boredom from drifting into chaos. You notice it during meals. One sailor waits until the navigator finishes chewing before taking his own bite. Another hesitates when his shadow falls across the food baskets, shifting aside with exaggerated care. At first, you'd think they're just being polite, but no. These are taboos, part of the invisible scaffolding that keeps order on a canoe too small for grudges. Mainstream fact. Polynesian societies used a system of tapu sacred restrictions to govern daily life. On a voyage, this could dictate who prepared food, who steered, and even who was allowed to touch certain tools. It wasn't arbitrary. The rules preserved hierarchy, ensured respect, and probably prevented arguments that might have ended with someone being nudged overboard. The quirky tidbit. Some tapu extended to jokes themselves. A junior sailor might be forbidden from mocking a chief's haircut, while mocking his paddling style was fair game. Imagine surviving weeks on the ocean, but getting in trouble for an ill-timed crack about your leader's bangs. Historians still argue whether tapu rules were more spiritual safeguards or practical survival strategies. Was it about appeasing gods, or simply preventing accidents by limiting who handled dangerous equipment? The line blurs as it often does in history, leaving you to wonder whether faith or pragmatism mattered more when both meant staying alive. You settle back, thinking about how strange it feels to be bound by rules that aren't written anywhere. Yet everyone obeys them instinctively. Even laughter follows its own rhythm here, gentle, never mocking authority too hard, but still bubbling enough to keep spirits alive. One man jokes that if you break a taboo, the stars themselves will paddle away and leave you stranded. The others laugh nervously, then fall quiet, glancing up at the constellations just in case. The canoe sways, the sea whispers, and you realize that on this floating world, order is as important as wind. Without it, the voyage might end long before land ever appears. The night deepens again, and with it comes sound. Not the chatter of paddlers, not the creak of ropes, but voices rising in melody. You blink, realizing the navigator isn't just reciting instructions. He's singing. The tune is slow, repetitive and hypnotic, like waves folding endlessly onto themselves. Each verse names a star, then another, mapping the heavens in lyrics that cling to memory better than dry directions ever could. Mainstream fact. Polynesian navigators often use chants to memorize star positions and sequences. Instead of listing bearings like a modern compass, they sang the sky into being, each note a landmark, each rhythm a line across the ocean. The human brain clings to music, so by turning astronomy into a lullaby, they ensured the knowledge would never slip away, even on the longest voyages. The quirky tidbit, Some of these chants doubled as sly lullabies for restless children. Imagine a navigator crooning about the precise rise of Sirius while a toddler drifts off, unconcerned that their bedtime story doubles as the survival plan for 50 people. Multitasking at its finest. Historians still argue whether the songs were strictly practical or infused with layers of myth. Were they manuals hidden in music or myths disguised as manuals? Some scholars lean toward pragmatism, while others say you can't separate knowledge from story in cultures where memory was the only library. The debate drifts on, like everything else under these stars. You close your eyes and listen. The navigator's voice isn't polished. It's a little raspy, a little uneven, but it carries conviction. Others hum along quietly, reinforcing the pattern. You catch fragments. Star rises. Fish leaps. Island waits. It's less a song than a map in motion, painted across the air in syllables. The canoe rocks. The sails sigh. And you realize you're being lulled twice, over once by the ocean itself, and once by this celestial playlist. If you ever tried to sing directions to your house, it would sound ridiculous. But out here, it's the only music that matters. The song fades, leaving you heavy-eyed, but the night is far from over. The navigator turns to an apprentice, a younger sailor who looks both proud and terrified. His task is simple in theory. Keep his eyes on a rising star and maintain the canoe's heading. In practice, it's like trying to stare at the second hand of a clock for 3 hours without looking away. You watch him fidget, shift his weight, then jerk upright whenever his gaze slips. Mainstream fact: training a Polynesian navigator could take years, sometimes decades. Apprentices memorized hundreds of stars, learned the behavior of ocean swells, and practiced watching seabirds and cloud formations. The knowledge wasn't just technical, it was sacred, entrusted to a select few. Passing the tests meant becoming a wayfinder, the lifeline of entire communities. The quirky tidbit: some teachers tested their students by throwing in deliberate distractions, jokes, songs, even food bribes to see if they could stay focused. Picture being handed a roasted breadfruit while your mentor leans in, whispering, "Don't you dare look away from that star." It was as much a battle of willpower as knowledge. Historians still argue whether apprentices were chosen by birthright descendants of famous navigators or selected purely for talent. Some records suggest elite families guarded the art, while others imply anyone with sharp eyes and sharper patience could earn the role. Like many things, the truth likely lies somewhere in the rocking middle of the canoe. The apprentice tonight shifts again, muttering under his breath. Another sailor teases him. "That star will wait, but the sea won't," and laughter ripples across the deck. Still, the youth steadies himself, squaring his shoulders, refusing to blink. You almost root for him, caught up in the quiet drama of whether his eyelids or his pride will win. Meanwhile, the canoe glides on, propelled by wind, by rhythm, and by sheer determination. You lean back, realizing that every successful voyage depended not just on one master navigator, but on generations of half-asleep apprentices who fought to stay awake under these same endless skies. The stars wheel overhead, but the sea below is restless. Clouds smother parts of the sky, and for a moment the navigator frowns. Without clear constellations, you'd think the canoe is blind, yet he seems unshaken. He tilts his head, listening as though the waves themselves are murmuring secrets in the dark. The apprentice from before shifts nervously, his hard-earned focus suddenly useless. Mainstream fact: many Polynesian voyagers described islands long since lost reefs that sank, atolls washed away, or small landfalls erased by rising seas. Oral traditions preserved their memory, treating these places as real stops on ancient routes. To the sailors, they were as solid as the stars. The quirky tidbit: some swore that when storms raged, angry spirits could tilt the heavens, making constellations slide from their usual positions. To modern ears, it sounds impossible. But if you've ever tried to navigate under a shifting sky and lurching horizon, you can see why the idea caught hold. It's not the stars moving, it's you, wobbling, seasick, convinced the cosmos has had one too many cups of kava. Historians still argue whether reports of phantom islands were purely myth or based on real places now lost to erosion and time. Archaeological surveys sometimes hint at vanished atolls, lending credibility to the legends. Others insist these stories reflect psychological maps wayfinders embedding cautionary tales into geography. Either way, you're left with the eerie notion that entire islands could vanish, leaving only songs and whispered names. The sea grows choppier. Spray kisses your face, cool and salty. You grip the edge of the deck, half expecting to see land appear, half expecting nothing at all. The navigator chants softly, not to calm the sea, but to calm the crew. His voice threads reassurance into the wind, steadying everyone who dares to listen. You glance upward, hoping for stars to peek through. For a brief second, the fish constellation emerges between clouds, its scales glittering. A ripple of relief sweeps the crew, like finding a flashlight in a blackout. The storm may bend the sea, but the stars, whether straight or slanted, keep guiding the way. Morning light creeps across the horizon, painting the waves in pale gold. The canoe drifts toward a small atoll where palm fronds shiver in the breeze, promising shade and coconuts. As the paddlers steer closer, you notice something almost as lively as the seabirds, the gossip. Word travels faster here than the current. Before the canoe even nudges the beach, men and women are already wading out, eager to trade news, food, and stories. Mainstream fact: Polynesian voyagers connected vast networks of islands, carrying not only goods like shells, mats, and pigs, but also oral histories. These exchanges created a kind of cultural web, ensuring that myths, genealogies, and practical knowledge spread across distances as great as entire continents. The quirky tidbit: canoes were sometimes nicknamed after the juiciest rumors they carried. An arrival might be greeted with laughter. Ah, here comes the canoe that says, "Your cousin's taro patch flooded again." Imagine being remembered less for your sailing prowess and more for tattling on root vegetables. Historians still argue whether these oral exchanges amounted to systematic record-keeping or just colorful chatter. Some anthropologists suggest they formed a deliberate network of knowledge, a living archive across the Pacific. Others say it was more casual, like a never-ending campfire conversation that morphed with every retelling. Either way, the effect was the same. No island was truly isolated. On shore, baskets of breadfruit and bundles of pandanus leaves change hands. Someone strums a simple tune on a nose flute, yes, a flute played with nostrils, and children giggle at your startled expression. One elder leans close, telling a tale about a distant island where fish leap straight into your canoe. No nets required. The crew laughs knowingly, as if they've heard that exaggeration 100 times before. Back aboard, you realize the ocean isn't just a highway. It's a whispering corridor, carrying not just canoes, but the very heartbeat of cultures. Every landfall is another chance to trade gossip, swap songs, and feel, if only briefly, that the world is stitched together by stories. By the time the sun dips low again, the air feels different, thicker, almost sweet. You tilt your head and there it is, a faint whiff of smoke, wood and leaves curling together. The sailors smile knowingly. Long before land is visible, its scent reaches the canoe, carrying promises of fires tended, meals cooking, and fields waiting beyond the horizon. Mainstream fact: approaching islands could often be detected not by sight, but by smell. Polynesian voyagers described the earthy aroma of taro patches, the tang of volcanic soil, or the distinct sharpness of smoke drifting far out to sea. Combined with the patterns of clouds hanging stubbornly above land, these sensory cues guided crews with astonishing accuracy. The quirky tidbit? Some navigators swore they could even taste the difference in rainwater as they neared land. Supposedly, storms gathered more sweetly over islands than in the open ocean. Picture a sailor tilting back his head, licking raindrops and declaring, "Yep, that tastes like Hawaii." Everyone else probably rolled their eyes, but they didn't argue. Historians still argue whether these scent and taste reports were reliable techniques or just poetic exaggerations. Some suggest they were part of ritual storytelling, elevating the navigator's role to mystical status. Others argue the human nose, especially unaccustomed to modern pollutants, truly could pick up subtle cues. You like to imagine it was a mix of both. Science sharpened by story. The canoe keeps sliding forward, and now the paddlers murmur. Ahead, the shape of trees forms a jagged silhouette against the stars. Relief washes across the deck. No more endless fish-dried meals, no more squinting at the horizon until your eyes water. The air fills with scents of soil, smoke, and green leaves, wrapping you like a blanket. You exhale, realizing the most comforting map of all isn't in the stars or swells, but in that unmistakable smell of land home, or at least something close enough to rest upon. The island behind you fades into memory as the canoe pushes back to sea. But something has changed. You realize you're not just retracing ancient footsteps, you're part of a legacy. The paddlers glance up proudly as they talk of modern voyages, stories of their grandparents' generation and beyond, of how the old ways nearly slipped into silence before being reborn. Mainstream fact. In the 20th century, Polynesian wayfinding nearly disappeared under colonial influence, replaced by Western navigation tools. Yet in the 1970s, the Hawaiian canoe, Hokulea, was built, and a Micronesian master navigator, Maupiailug, guided it across the Pacific without compass or charts. That voyage stunned skeptics and reignited pride in Polynesian knowledge. The quirky tidbit. During training for the Hokulea, some volunteers admitted seasickness so fierce that they tried bribing the navigator for shortcuts. "Just let us use the compass once, please." He refused, insisting that the only cure was to stare at the horizon and keep paddling. Talk about tough love. Historians still argue whether the Polynesian expansion required dozens of planned voyages or just a handful of spectacular crossings that seeded populations. The revivalists, though, shrug at the debate. They say the proof is in the practice canoes still sailing today, guided by stars, swells, and chance, proving what their ancestors always knew. You watch the crew as they swap stories of those modern journeys. One man hums a tune revived from old chants, his voice shaky but proud. Another tells of schoolchildren watching Hokulea return home, eyes wide as if seeing heroes step out of the constellations themselves. You realize it's not just about islands connected by sea. It's about generations connected by memory, stitched together by trust in the sky. The stars are the same ones your host's ancestors watched, the same ones Maupiailug read, the same ones still waiting above you now. You tilt your head back, heavy-eyed, thinking that if the stars are eternal, maybe the stories are too. The sea is hushed now, a vast mirror of black glass tinged with faint streaks of silver. The canoe drifts steadily onward, as though reluctant to disturb the quiet of the coming dawn. Overhead, the stars begin their final act. You watch as the fish constellation, the one that guided you since twilight, slides gently toward the horizon. Its tail dips first, then its body, until only the faint sparkle of its head lingers. The navigator nods, satisfied. To him, this isn't just starlight fading. It's the natural handoff to morning, proof that the path has been followed well. Mainstream fact. Wayfinders relied on the sequence of stars not only for direction, but also for timing. Each rising or setting constellation marked the changing hours of the night, serving as both compass and clock. Long before alarm apps or snooze buttons, sailors kept time by cosmic choreography. The quirky tidbit. Some navigators claimed they could smell dawn before the sky brightened. They swore that the ocean air shifted just before sunrise, less briny, more like damp stone and wet grass. Whether poetic imagination or superhuman nose, it became one more layer of assurance that morning was truly coming. Historians still argue whether navigators deliberately prolonged nighttime sailing to maximize star visibility or preferred daylight for safety. Some evidence suggests crews cherished the stars so much that voyages often launched at twilight, ensuring the sky offered guidance from the start. Others argue that daytime gave clearer views of swells and birds. Like most debates, the truth is probably both: night for orientation, day for detail. Your own eyes grow heavy as dawn threatens. The navigator hums softly, no longer chanting star paths, but something gentler like a farewell. Around you, the paddlers ease their strokes. The world slows. You glance east and see the first bruised streak of pink, thin as a thread, but undeniable. A new day begins, and with it, the comforting thought that the voyage like the story continues, even as you drift towards sleep. The stars are gone now, hidden behind the soft wash of morning light. The canoe rocks lazily, no longer chasing constellations, but simply carried by the steady breath of the sea. You let your shoulders drop, your jaw unclench. Your eyelids flutter as the ocean's lullaby settles deep in your bones. The paddlers have set down their oars, and the navigator sits quietly, watching the horizon without urgency. His work is never truly finished, yet in this moment, he rests. The night has carried its burden. The stars have delivered their gift, and the sea has proven once again that patience is the only true compass. You hear the faint creak of ropes, the whisper of the sails slackening, the hush of water slipping past the hull. Each sound grows softer, stretched like a long yawn. The breeze cools, carrying the promise of land, of rest, of safety. The sky brightens in shades of rose and gold, but to you it feels like a blanket being pulled gently over tired eyes. Allow yourself to sink into that stillness. Imagine the canoe cradling you, the ocean rocking you with infinite care, the stars above, lingering in memory even if no longer in sight. The night's journey is done, yet its rhythm remains inside you, steady, soothing, unbroken. Breathe slowly. Let the weight of wakefulness slip away. There is nothing more to steer, nothing more to watch, nothing more to hold. Only the calm, the dawn, and the certainty that every voyage, no matter how vast, ends in rest. Now let your body drift, as though you too are carried on those ancient star paths into a morning that belongs only to dreams.